Hello, and welcome to another edition of CTS Biz Talk. I'm your usual host, Frank Stevens. So thank you everyone for joining. Today I have a special guest. I've got Bill Martin, who is the president of Gateway Underwriters Agency. Hey, Bill.
Hi, how are you, Frank?
I'm doing well. Summer is here, and we're having fun.
Absolutely.
I got introduced from Bill. Bill is actually the underwriter of our insurance broker where we get our cybersecurity insurance from. And we've been, obviously, cyber's in the news. I always mention that. And we have more and more of our clients asking, hey, how do we ensure that we have the proper coverage? How are we going to maybe make sure that we're minimizing our premiums? How does the whole shopping around process? We get these letters all the time. How do we handle it? So today's topic is underwriting cyber. Strategies for protecting your business. So I brought the big heavy hitter in, and thank you, Bill, for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to share a little bit of background about yourself and Gateway, that would be awesome.
Sure. So again, my name is Bill Martin. I'm president of Gateway Underwriters. We're a wholesaler that specializes in placing tough to place business for independent insurance agents. And I've been in insurance for the last 20 some years. So, when I started in insurance, started in underwriting, cyber wasn't, even a topic. So it's been fun to really see that, not many people get to see a new class of insurance come about. And so it's been really fun to see that come about. And then the changes that have occurred within cyber over the last, 15, 20 years. It really started as a data security problem and then morphed into what it is today, which covers, things that you can't even think of or, imagine happening. So, it's one of the few insurance policies that really goes through drastic changes year to year. So it's fun to keep, up to date on those things and advise clients. And, I'm here to help in any way I possibly can.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that overview. So from our perspective, from the tech perspective, we are getting, and I probably think 4 to 5 of these insurance cybersecurity questionnaires a month. And I think there's probably, if we wind maybe 3 years ago, we'd see maybe see once a month. Sure, we've been CTS is growing, we're adding clients, but not at that rate. And so these questionnaires that are coming, they're becoming more stringent, and it's forcing the clients to put more controls in place to protect them. And what we have seen, though, is when some clients will be like, just sign off on this, Frank and Simon, or whoever on my team's doing it, they're literally just clicking yes. And there may not be something on the back end. So talk to us about the questionnaires, the importance of them, and how that plays out in the coverage and what they can expect.
Absolutely. So, just to give a brief background of, the underwriting of cyber liability, data security. 10 years, 15 years ago, you would see an application and it would be 8 to 9 pages long asking you every single question about, your tech platform. And there weren't that many claims at that time. So, a lot of carriers said, we're asking all of these questions that really don't pertain to what we're doing. And the only claims that we are seeing is, stolen data on either employees or customers. And so they were paying out those claims. They said, okay, well, let's really focus our application questions to how many records is somebody storing? So we know, if they have 25,000 records and there's a data breach and those records get taken, we know what we're going to pay out. So we're going to focus that application. We're going to cut it down to 1, maybe 2 pages, really focused on what data we're securing and what data a company has. So they did that for a handful of years. Then, and what we're seeing today, you have social engineering, you have still the data security issues, you have ransomware, you have cyber extortion, you have bricking. So all of these different types of claims started coming in because there's a lot of money involved in holding hostage of people's data, stealing people's data. A lot of professionals blame cryptocurrency for a lot of this because it gave them a way to exchange money without ever getting caught.
Yep.
So that started happening, And so then they had to go back to these longer applications, figuring out what's your firewalls, do you have MFA, how, do you have offsite servers, all these different types of questions to know, hey, if this type of claim happens, how can we mitigate it? How can we avoid some of these claims from happening? So we want to understand how to price the risk accordingly. And so that's kind of where we are today. 4 years ago, there was a huge spike in claims. People were paying out more than they ever thought they would.
Yeah.
They didn't have the information to underwrite it properly. They were underpriced. And so they had to go back to the drawing board and create new applications. So that's what we're seeing today. And while you are probably seeing a lot of those applications or questionnaires, there are a lot of tech-driven questions on those that, the average person probably does not know how to answer, what it means, or how can I get it. And so, really that's the point of that application. And what most people do not know, and what's very important in answering those questions correctly, number one, it allows the underwriter to assess and underwrite that risk, price that risk accordingly, and have a good understanding of what they're getting involved in. Now, from a customer's perspective, answering improperly and then signing that application, turning it over to that insurance company, getting that cyber policy, that application becomes warranted, which means it's signed, it's guaranteed, and it becomes part of that policy. So if they misrepresent information on that application and they have a claim, an insurance carrier, their attorneys, their legal team can look at it and say, this wouldn't have happened if they had MFA. They said on their application they had MFA. We did a deep dive. They never had it. We are denying this claim and denying the coverage for misrepresentation of material information based on what they put on the application. So that is really, from a customer's point of view, that's the most important piece of why it's important to get correct. From your point of view, there's a whole different list of reasons why, but from your customer's point of view, that's why they need to have that information correctly portrayed when representing themselves to the insurance carrier. Yeah.
I have a friendly competitor that they had a client that never reached out to my friendly competitor, the client, and they literally just said, got it all. And they had a breach. They didn't have MFA. They didn't have any EDR, endpoint detection response. It took them completely out. And, thank God they did have backups and stuff. But the organization, the amount of money that they lost in productivity and revenue was out the door. Like, you do not get that business continuity. And so it is super important to be ultra honest, right? And and do the right thing, because you don't want to be paying for something that you get denied the claim. So,
absolutely.
Great point. The other thing that I noticed is some of our clients as insurance companies now are coming to the client and saying, hey, you check that you have security awareness training, which is, constant, training and giving educational pieces to their employees. And we do that ourselves. We supply it to our clients. And it's interesting, the insurance companies are saying, hey, that's cool, you have it. You still have to use ours. And I love that, because they're protecting the client and making sure that they're reducing the amount of a potential claim or an incident. So it's kind of cool that they're doing that.
Yes, and we see that more and more. We see a lot of carriers offering training. We see a lot of carriers as add-ons to their policies. They're doing anti-phishing campaigns, sending things out, see who clicks what, and then use that as an opportunity to teach, hey, this is something that you clicked on. Luckily, it was coming from us. It was a test. You failed the test, but here's how we can correct it. And then, a lot of, again, additional add-ons to a good cyber policy outside of the anti-phishing campaigns. They will do continuous monitoring of your website, of your server, to make sure there's no attacks pending or anybody trying to get in. They also do deep dives into the deepest parts of the web to see if you have any information floating out there.
Sure.
And so I know, from time to time, we have a standalone cyber policy as an organization, and from time to time we'll get emails saying, Bill, we found, a password to this website down on the deep web. Please go in and change it. And so it monitors that. Without that, we would have no idea anything exists. So it helps us, but from the insurance company point of view, it also helps them because they're taking away potential threats.
100%. Yeah, at this point, I think everyone should assume that their data has been breached at one point.
Right.
It's the unfortunate world. I mean, every week, major organization, we drop the ball. Oh, cool, sounds good.
Right.
So, let's talk about another item. So, in the event that an organization fills out the questionnaire, they get the underwriting, they get their policy in place, and there is a need to make a claim. I have not been part of anything like this, but I've read online in which that if the organization and the business that has been impacted by a cyber breach or a hack or whatever happens, it is important to engage the insurance company to follow their policies and procedures to ensure that they're engaged at the correct time and that the claim is going to be made. How does that work? And talk to me about that.
So there's a couple of different reasons why that's important. One, you when you're looking and shopping around for an insurance policy, you'll want to kind of know what triggers a claim. A lot of companies out there, you will say, as soon as you think there may have been a breach or you think something's odd, let us know. So we can get involved early. Some carriers out there say, there's only a trigger of a claim unless there's a proven breach. That's one way to look at it. But if you're shopping around, you probably want something that you can notify them right away, and they get involved because, as you are aware, these things happen quickly. So as soon as there's a breach, soon as somebody finds a wormhole into a server, it's not they don't stop to celebrate and say, I found, a wormhole and I'm in. They attack, they gather as much information as possible. They take it out, they control your system. And so you want to get the professionals involved as quickly as possible. And most cyber policies, state that. Your responsibility, your duty of care is to alert us immediately upon a breach or the threat of a breach so we can get involved. There is potential if you don't alert them right away that there can be denial of a claim or at least a portion of the claim until they get involved. But a lot of people still have a mindset when it comes to insurance. They don't want to report a claim because they're scared their insurance cost is going to go up. I promise you, I promise you, if you have a breach and you don't involve your insurance company, that breach is going to cost a lot more money than the increased rate of your insurance. So it's in your best interest to get them involved right away. And so that's really why it's so important. You kind of have to throw out that mindset of, I don't want to get my insurance. I want to see my insurance company involved. I want to see if I can handle it on my own before going to them. If you try to piece together all of what an insurance policy does for you when a breach occurs, you're going to be paying way more money. And so that's the biggest part is they want to get involved so they can find what happened and fix it. Or if they're, if it's a case of ransomware, most insurance policies for cyber will do the ransomware negotiation, and they are much better at it than a person who doesn't have that experience.
Yeah. So if I'm an organization out there and I something doesn't smell or look right, and I believe that there may be a situation, you engage. Obviously, you're a company like me, a managed service provider. I say, hey, something isn't right. I throw the flag. The organization, let's say my client reaches out to their insurance company. We may have a situation, right? And and I've worked on this side where they have troops. They have forensic guys who come in. If they don't find anything, and they're like, yep, nothing. There's no evidence of a breach. Data is secure. Nothing was taken. Is that a bad thing for the organization? Like, does that cost anything? Okay.
No. So,
Okay.
and that's just, when you start looking at different types of insurance policies for cyber, there's a whole slew of different types of policies. And the main thing you look for immediately, and a smaller organization, they may have what's called a business owner's policy or a BOP. And that's kind of a bundled insurance policy with your property, your general liability, all in one nice little package. You have one policy, you pay one premium, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. Now, with a BOP, you can get endorsements for cyber, for employment practices liability, and they're small add-ons to that policy. And
Okay.
so, and a lot of times companies will do that. Say, oh yeah, that sounds great. I'll take that. I'll get cyber liability. And what you really have to do as an organization is look at it. And, this is what an insurance agent is for. They want you to be fully covered. So if you say, I just want this, cyber endorsement, they're going to take that cyber endorsement and say, okay, here's what you get for your $250. And then here's a standalone policy for maybe $1,200.
Okay.
Here are the differences. And you as a agent or as a owner of a company or a risk manager of a company have to weigh what you need and what you can live without. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the main issues with the BOP endorsed certificate versus a standalone policy, a lot of times that BOP endorsed policy won't cover first party claims. It'll only cover third party claims. And really the difference between first party and third party, the easiest way to understand it is first party claims are things that happen to you, and third party claims are things because of a breach to you happen to your customers or vendors or something like that.
Does that include, what about employees? Are employees first party?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And so, you mentioned business interruption.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge piece right now because of ransomware, of bricking, all of that, renders a lot of your data or software useless.
Correct.
And so if you can't use your software, your computers for a couple of weeks, you're losing out on business.
Yeah.
And so a full insurance policy for cyber will cover business interruption, whereas a lot of the cyber endorsed BOP products will exclude first party coverages or maybe only provide $10,000. And so, that's the first thing you really want to start looking at is what is the policy actually covering? What am I getting? And as a organization, where are my exposures? So, people may not really have a first party exposure. If, a small retail shop where, they're not keeping data, they're selling clothes.
Yeah.
They may not have a big first party exposure, and their only exposure may be third party because they're taking credit card swipes. And so, any breach is going to happen to their customers. So third party may be enough for that.
Got it.
So that's what your insurance professional should be talking to you about, and really diving deep into your operation to see what you need.
Do insurance brokers, you mentioned swiping of credit cards, which plays into PCI compliance. I've seen some of that stuff on some of the questionnaires and the requirements. Do insurance providers ever get involved with the compliance aspect of it?
They do not. So they'll,
Okay.
like you said, they'll ask, are you PCI compliant? And
Mhm.
if you say no, you're probably not going to get many opportunities for coverage.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they, if you have it and there's some issue that is base in it, you always kind of look, where did the breach occur? Did the breach occur through your system? Then yeah, your insurance company is probably going to respond. If the breach occurred through the credit card company or the third party providing the credit card information, their insurance policy is going to respond.
Got it. Okay. Great. Well, no, that's pretty insightful. So any other kind of words of wisdom that you want to share about cybersecurity or other insurance policies? I could just tell you that the majority of our listeners are small, mid-sized business owners. They range from, 10 to up to 250 employees. So I think you get the risks that they have.
Sure.
And some of the insurance needs that they have.
Yeah, I think, there's a few things to look at when you're identifying what's right for you. Obviously each person's going to know their operations best. But when you start, cyber liability compared to most other insurance policies, the add-ons to a policy are just as important as the meat of the policy. So a few things, one that we already talked about, the anti-phishing campaigns, the training, the continuous security assessments, all of those are something that you'd want to look for. Because that insurance company is also actively involved in keeping you safe. And so, if they employ, somebody like CTS, and to help with that, they just have, more layers to it. And, they can communicate, as you see on those applications. A lot of times they ask for, do you have a managed service provider? Because we'll work with them in conjunction of protecting you. So those add-ons are great. And then you want to look at the response that the carrier is going to have. Like what we talked about earlier, what triggers a claim. Can you report as early as you think you might have a claim? And then for some of the larger companies, you're going to want to look at the response management. So most of them are going to do the ransomware negotiations, the credit and the identification and healthcare monitoring.
Yeah.
But some of those larger organizations that may need to set up a call center to field a bunch of questions from customers because of a breach, policies will help do that. Policies will have PR firms on staff to help you, get through the nightmare of PR and, the reputational harm that you can, face.
Which is serious out there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
Yeah. And then, your insurance agent should go over the coverage limit. So you're looking for the cybercrime, which is, invoice manipulation, theft of funds, things like that, the business interruption that you mentioned. And, one area you want to see and determine if it's needed for you is, do you have separate limits for the incident response cost and the claims cost and the regulations? Those are all sublimited on certain policies. And then full coverage for data recovery. And then, the last thing I would say is, identify where their claims response is coming from. A lot of the well-established cyber carriers out there have their own claims teams where, they're working right next to the underwriters in the office, and, they're working side by side, making sure that, they're handling everything properly, quickly. If somebody has, some carriers use a third-party claims handling service. You kind of want to do your homework and see who that third party is and what their experience and response time is as well. So you are comfortable with what happens when a claim arises. And like you said earlier, most people have been exposed at some point in time. The industry knows most people are going to have a claim at some point in time. And, from a cost perspective, cyber insurance is one of the least expensive coverages because of the cost of the claims. The average claim on a cyber policy is about $150,000, and that's for a small claim. And you have a $1,200 policy with a exposure of a minimum of $150,000. That's a very cheap cost compared to what you have on the other lines.
No, I never thought about that from a proportional perspective. So this I just thought of. We have more and more clients integrating and implementing AI solutions into their organization, which is super cool. Like I'm using Copilot and different tools myself. But when I'm going down the path, and so we have some clients that have really sensitive data, accounting firms, CPA firms, financial organizations, like top secret stuff, right? Not top secret, but you get the right. There's compliance around it, HIPAA, whatever it may be. And as you are feeding and allowing the AI solutions to digest your company and your company's data, how does that work from a cybersecurity perspective? Like in the event that, let's say, Microsoft Copilot, and you have a full version of it, the $30 a month, It's supposed to be top notch. Your data is yours. It's not sharing your data with other people to build up in that. If that were a breach, I can't even imagine the potential claim on something like that.
Right.
You know, and so I guess my question is: are the insurance agencies looking, saying what kind of AI tools are you using, and what kind of safeguards do you have in place on that?
Right now,
that's bigger. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's just starting to be asked because the exposure is starting to realize.
Yeah.
And so those questions are starting to be asked, and then kind of the next steps will be a lot of the larger organizations that use AI in some way, shape, or form, they bring it all in house. Where they integrate it into their system, so you're not going out to ChatGPT and uploading something. You're doing out an internal server that has no access out. And so for those companies, it's a lot better because you have more control. You know that it's not going to be leaked. Now, to your point, somebody going out to Copilot and uploading a ton of customer data and saying, please analyze this data.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a huge exposure. And similar to the credit card situation is kind of how the insurance can respond. If it comes through your avenue into your Copilot and drags information out of there or hacks into Copilot through your account, then you're going to be on the hook. If it comes in a backdoor of Copilot and did not touch any of your servers, it just gathered that information from Copilot, then it's going to be on them.
Interesting.
But especially right away, and just like in every other insurance type of claim, if there's a lot of parties involved, everybody gets pulled into the lawsuit. And so and that's a huge piece of the insurance that people don't really understand is, okay, maybe I don't ever have a claim. Maybe something happens, in that situation, somebody breaches Microsoft, gathers information from CTS that you've used, and you had no breach. But the customer that has information stolen, they're going to sue, and they're going to name CTS. They're going to name Microsoft and anybody else who ever touched that information.
Anybody,
right. And without a policy, you have to pay to defend yourself. Now, with an insurance policy, they're going to pay the defense costs. They're going to get out of it, and so they're not going to pay a claim, but they still may rack up $85,000 worth of lawyer fees. And
that's not
without
cheap.
Without the insurance policy, you'd be on the hook for that $85,000.
Yeah. Interesting. More to come on AI and the integration with and all the touches it has. So great. So share your information. If people have additional questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I would since the position that I am in terms of where we fit into the insurance industry, we are a wholesale broker that only works through insurance agents. And I know I was referred here by Roberts and Ryan Insurance. And so I would say if you have any questions or you want to go over a policy, contact an agent at Roberts and Ryan, and they would be happy to help. And then if they have questions, they will definitely get in contact with Gateway.
Sounds good. Bill, thank you again. Appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you, Frank.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you got a couple nuggets of information and knowledge out of this, you're welcome, I guess. Please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you, everyone. Have a great day.